What happens when a private tech company removes a former president of the United States from its platform? Is it responsible moderation or corporate control over political speech? When Donald Trump was suspended from YouTube in early 2021, it wasn't just a policy decision. It triggered a national debate, a legal debate, political debate, and a cultural debate, because this wasn't only about one man. It was about power. In the 21st century, power no longer belongs only to governments. It also belongs to platforms. And when political power collides with digital power, the consequences are enormous. Tonight, we break down how this conflict started, what the law says, why it matters, and what it means for the future of democracy in the digital age. 2 decades ago, political communication meant television networks, newspapers, campaign rallies. Today, it means algorithms. YouTube, owned by Google under its parent company Alphabet, reaches billions worldwide. It is a news distributor, a campaign messaging tool, a fundraising engine, a cultural influence platform. For millions of Americans, YouTube functions as a primary source of political information. Unlike traditional media, it allows direct communication. No editor, no network gatekeeper, no middleman. But here's the key difference. YouTube is not a government institution. It is a private corporation. And that legal distinction would soon become critical. January 6, 2021. During certification of the 2020 election, a violent riot occurred at the U.S. Capitol. In the aftermath, major tech platforms reviewed their policies. Days later, YouTube suspended Donald Trump's channel. The company stated that certain content violated policies related to incitement and election misinformation. They argued the suspension was necessary to reduce the risk of further real-world harm. Supporters of Trump strongly disagreed. They argued a major elected leader had been removed from a critical communication channel. Big tech was biased. Private corporations were interfering in democratic communication. Opponents defended the move. Rules must apply equally, even to presidents. This moment transformed a content moderation decision into a national controversy. The debate quickly turned to the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects citizens from government censorship. But here's the legal reality. It does not prevent private companies from enforcing their own rules. Courts have repeatedly held social media platforms are not state actors. They are private entities. That means they can remove content, suspend accounts, enforce community guidelines. Legally, YouTube was within its rights, but politically, many Americans questioned whether companies this large should function purely as private actors. When a platform becomes a digital public square, its decisions affect national discourse, and that creates tension between legal authority and democratic expectation. Donald Trump publicly criticized major tech companies. He later filed lawsuits against several platforms, including YouTube. The argument: large technology companies operate like modern public utilities. Because of their dominance, they should not have unrestricted authority to remove political candidates. However, courts dismissed many of these claims. The legal line remained clear. Private moderation is not government censorship. Still, the lawsuits had political consequences. They energized calls in Congress to regulate big tech. They fueled distrust toward Silicon Valley, and they revived attention to a law called Section 230. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act provides two major protections. Platforms are not legally liable for most user-generated content, and they can moderate content in good faith. Supporters argue, without Section 230, platforms would face overwhelming lawsuits. Critics argue, the law gives companies too much protection, while allowing selective enforcement. The Trump YouTube conflict pushed Section 230 into mainstream political debate. A once obscure legal provision became nationally discussed. In March 2023, YouTube reinstated Trump's channel. The company stated that the risk environment had changed. They emphasized voters should have access to content from major political candidates. Some saw balance restored. Others questioned whether enforcement standards were consistent. The reinstatement revealed something deeper. Moderation in a polarized era is never simple. The debate did not end. It evolved. Artificial intelligence now enables deepfake videos, synthetic voices, fabricated political speeches that appear real. As elections approach, platforms face immense pressure. Prevent misinformation. Protect legitimate speech. If AI-generated misinformation spreads, who is responsible? The creator, the algorithm, or the platform? These questions extend far beyond Trump or YouTube. They define the next era of digital governance. Conclusion: the digital power era, 1830 to 2000 hours. This conflict represents more than political disagreement. It reflects a transformation in how power operates. Political authority once controlled communication systems. Today, much of that infrastructure is privately owned. When political power meets technological power, friction is inevitable. Should platforms be treated like public utilities? Should private companies decide which political voices have access? How should democracies balance safety and free expression? These questions remain unresolved. But one thing is certain: in the digital age, every platform decision has national consequences. It was a precedent. For the first time in American history, a former president was digitally silenced by a private corporation, not by Congress, not by the Supreme Court, not by voters, but by a tech company in Silicon Valley. That reality hit differently, because in America, free speech isn't just policy. It's identity, it's culture, it's constitutional DNA. And when a major political voice disappears overnight, the country pays attention. The First Amendment is clear: Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. But YouTube isn't Congress. It's a corporation, and corporations have rights. So legally, the suspension stood. Constitutionally, passed. But emotionally, for millions of Americans, felt like something else. Because when a platform hosts hundreds of millions of users, when campaigns depend on it, when voters depend on it, at what point does private power start to feel public? That question is where the fire started. Since 2021, the tension hasn't cooled. Republicans argue big tech censors conservative voices. Democrats argue big tech failed to stop dangerous misinformation. Different accusations, same conclusion. The platforms are powerful. Too powerful? Congress held hearings. Executives were grilled. Lawmakers proposed reforms. But real legislation still stalled. Because regulating speech in America is political dynamite. Touch it, and someone explodes. Behind every content decision, there's a balance sheet. YouTube answers to Alphabet. Alphabet answers to shareholders. Shareholders answer to markets. And markets hate instability. After January 6, advertisers reassessed risk. Brands demanded safety. Investors demanded stability. Boardrooms moved fast. Not just legally, financially. In modern America, speech, politics, and stock prices move together. That reality changes everything. Then came reinstatement. March 2023. The political climate had shifted. An election cycle was approaching. The platform emphasized access. Access to candidates. Access to information. Access to voters. But reinstatement didn't quiet the debate. It sharpened it. If a president can be suspended and later restored, who defines the threshold? Who decides the risk? Who sets the standard? Consistency builds trust, and trust is fragile. Now, the equation changes again. Artificial intelligence, deepfake videos, synthetic voices, speeches that look real, sound real, but never happened. As America moves toward future elections, the battlefield shifts. It's no longer just about moderating speech. It's about identifying reality. And when reality becomes harder to verify, democracy becomes harder to protect. Platforms must move faster than deception. But deception evolves daily. The United States has faced speech debates before: wartime censorship, broadcast regulation, campaign finance battles. But this moment feels different, because the infrastructure itself is private, and the scale is global. In a nation built on liberty, who draws the line? A corporation? An algorithm? Congress? The courts? Or the voters? There is no simple answer, only trade-offs. Final cinematic close. The Trump-YouTube conflict was never just about one account. It exposed a new power structure: executive, legislative, judicial, and now, digital, privately owned, globally scaled, algorithmically driven. The Constitution was written in ink. Today's platforms run on code, and code moves faster than law. The question isn't whether platforms influence democracy. They do. The question is, who governs the governors of digital speech? Because in modern America, the campaign doesn't begin at a rally. It begins on a platform, and the fight over who controls that platform is just getting started. According to multiple national surveys over the past decade, public trust in major American institutions, including government, media, and corporations, has declined. Confidence varies sharply along partisan lines. In such an environment, controversial decisions rarely land neutrally. A suspension may be interpreted as censorship. A reinstatement may be interpreted as favoritism. An algorithm change may be interpreted as manipulation. In periods of low institutional trust, even procedural actions can be viewed through a political lens. That context magnifies scrutiny, and scrutiny magnifies reaction. Part 18. The Moderation Dilemma. Behind the headlines are moderation teams, policy specialists, legal advisors, risk analysts. They apply pre-existing rules, community guidelines written long before specific controversies emerge. But high-profile political content introduces additional complexity. Is a statement political rhetoric? Is it incitement? Is it opinion? Is it misinformation? Context matters. Timing matters. Impact matters. Most large platforms rely on layered review systems, automated detection, human moderators, escalation teams. No system is flawless. At global scale, even rare errors can become highly visible. And in a polarized political climate, inconsistencies, whether real or perceived, can quickly generate backlash. Every election cycle now becomes a stress test for digital platforms. Policies are updated. Monitoring increases. Transparency reports expand. Because elections are not just political events. They are legitimacy events. If voters lose confidence in the information ecosystem surrounding an election, the consequences extend beyond a single candidate. That is why moderation decisions during election periods carry unusual weight. They are scrutinized by campaigns, journalists, lawmakers, and citizens alike. And in a closely divided nation, neutrality is often contested. Some argue that market forces provide the solution. If users disagree with a platform's policies, they can migrate elsewhere. And indeed, alternative platforms have emerged. Some users have relocated. Some communities have fragmented. Digital competition exists. At the same time, large platforms benefit from strong network effects. The more users a platform has, the more valuable it becomes for political messaging, advertising, and public debate. Candidates go where the audience is. Audiences gather where conversation is active. That dynamic reinforces scale. The debate, then, is not whether alternatives exist. It is whether scale itself creates unique influence. In Washington, discussions about antitrust enforcement have intensified. Some policymakers argue that breaking up large technology firms could reduce concentrated influence. Others caution that fragmentation may introduce new challenges, inconsistent standards, weaker moderation resources, or increased vulnerability to manipulation. Structural reform is complex. Reducing scale does not automatically resolve questions of speech governance, and increasing regulation risks unintended consequences. Innovation, competition, and constitutional protections must all be weighed carefully. Beyond law and regulation, a cultural shift is underway. A generation has grown up entirely online. Political engagement increasingly occurs through feeds, clips, and short-form content. Campaign messaging is micro-targeted. Audiences are segmented. That segmentation can contribute to fragmented information environments. When citizens encounter different streams of content, shared narratives can become harder to sustain. At the same time, digital platforms have expanded access. Voices historically marginalized in traditional media now reach national audiences. Grassroots movements mobilize faster than ever before. The digital transformation carries both risks and democratic expansion. Its impact depends on how systems evolve. What do you think? Should platforms have full control over political content, or should digital speech be governed differently? Share your thoughts below, because this debate is not over. It's just beginning.